Pay attention to the timestamp on the dashboard camera, March 14, 2019. 11:47 p.m. 2847 Oakmont Drive, Springfield, Illinois. A residential street lined with post-war Cape Cods and aging ranch homes. Streetlights cast uneven pools of yellow light across cracked sidewalks. Most windows are dark. A few porch lights remain on. The temperature is 34 degrees Fahrenheit. Light rain has been falling intermittently since 9:15 p.m. The asphalt glistens. Watch the figure who emerges from the side door of the gray two-story house with the detached garage. Male, mid-40s. Moving quickly toward the street. No coat despite the cold. At the shoulder and chest. Left arm held against his torso at an awkward angle. He reaches the curb. He looks back toward the house once. Then he pulls a cell phone from his pocket. Within 8 hours, investigators would discover a concealed room built into the crawl space beneath that house. The room had been occupied for 19 months, and the injuries that brought paramedics to 2847 Oakmont Drive that night were not the result of the accident the man described. This was not a call for help. It was a mistake. At 11:49 p.m., Springfield Fire Department Engine 7 and Medic 4 received a dispatch for a male with traumatic injuries at 2847 Oakmont Drive. Caller reported falling down basement stairs, possible broken ribs, difficulty breathing. Paramedic Lisa Chen arrived first, 33 years old. 9 years with Springfield Fire. She had worked trauma calls in the city's South District for the past 4 years. She had seen basement falls before. Chen exited the ambulance and approached the figure standing beneath the street light at the curb. The man was bent slightly forward. His breathing was shallow and rapid. Blood had soaked through the left feet side of his t-shirt from shoulder to waist. His left feet forearm showed visible swelling and discoloration. Chen introduced herself and asked his name. Robert Keller, he said. His voice was tight with pain. What happened, Mr. Keller? I fell.
Down the basement stairs. I think I broke my arm.
Maybe a rib. Chen guided him toward the back of the ambulance. Partner Jason Mitchell, 38, 6 years with the department, opened the rear doors and lowered the hydraulic step. They helped Keller inside. Mitchell began taking vitals. Blood pressure 104/2 over 94, pulse 108/18, respiration rate 22 breaths per minute. Elevated but consistent with pain and shock, Chen examined the injuries. The left feet forearm showed an obvious deformity consistent with a fracture. 2 ribs on the left feet side appeared broken based on palpation and Keller's pain response. But Chen noticed something else. The blood pattern on Keller's shirt was wrong. Basement falls typically produced impact injuries, contusions, lacerations from striking edges or railings. The bleeding here was localized and deeper in a State Department hospital. The fabric was torn in 2 places along the upper arm. The tears were linear, not consistent with catching on a railing or striking a step. Chen asked to see the wounds directly. Keller hesitated.
Then he pulled the shirt over his head with visible difficulty. 2 deep lacerations ran diagonally across his left feet shoulder and upper arm,
each approximately 4 inches long. The edges were relatively clean. The wounds were still bleeding but had begun to clot. Chen estimated they were 20 to 30 minutes old. These were not fall injuries. These were defensive wounds. Chen looked at her partner. Mitchell's expression indicated he saw it too. Chen stepped back and asked Keller to wait while they prepared the gurney. She moved to the front of the ambulance. She radioed dispatch. Medic 4 to dispatch. We need police response at our location. Injuries inconsistent with reported mechanism. At 11:56 p.m., Springfield police officers Daniel Vasquez and Amy Hartman arrived on scene.
Vasquez was 41, 16 years on the force.
He stepped out of the patrol car and walked toward the ambulance where Keller sat on the rear bumper, now wrapped in a thermal blanket. Vasquez introduced himself and asked Keller what happened. Keller repeated his story. He had been carrying laundry down to the basement. I couldn't bite a mouth without a pay for debt. He fell. He struck the railing with his arm and torso. He lay at the bottom of the stairs for several minutes before climbing back up and calling 911. Vasquez asked if anyone else was home. No, Keller said. I live alone. Vasquez asked if he could see the basement. Keller said the side door was unlocked. Vasquez and Hartman entered the house through the side door, which opened into a small mudroom. They moved through the kitchen, dated appliances, dishes in the sink, a single coffee mug on the counter. They found the basement door in a short hallway near the bathroom. Vasquez opened it. He descended the wooden stairs. Hartman followed. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed floor joists. A furnace in the far corner, metal utility shelves along one wall holding paint cans and cardboard boxes. A washer and dryer against the opposite wall. Fluorescent shop lights hung from the ceiling joists.
No laundry basket. No spilled laundry.
No blood on the stairs or the floor. Vasquez climbed back up. He returned to the ambulance. He asked Keller where the laundry basket was. Keller paused. Then he said he must have left it upstairs when he fell. Vasquez asked where upstairs. Keller said the bedroom. Vasquez returned to the house. He climbed to the second floor. 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. The larger bedroom appeared to be Keller's. Unmade bed, clothes draped over a chair, a laptop on a desk. No laundry basket, no clothing waiting to be washed. Vasquez descended the stairs and walked back outside. He told Keller the injuries didn't match his story.
Keller said nothing.
Vasquez asked again what happened. Keller said he wanted to go to the hospital. At 12:14 a.m., Medic 4 transported Robert Keller to Memorial Medical Center. Officers Vasquez and Hartman remained at 2847 Oakmont Drive. Vasquez walked the perimeter of the property. The backyard was enclosed by a 6-foot privacy fence. The gate was locked from the inside. The lawn was overgrown. But the detached garage had no windows and a roll-up door secured with a padlock. Vasquez returned to the front of the house. Porch lights on at 2843 Oakmont Drive, the house directly next door. An elderly woman stood in her doorway watching. Vasquez walked over. Her name was Margaret Flynn.
74-year-old. She had lived at 2843 Oakmont for 42 years.
She knew Robert Keller by sight but had never spoken to him beyond brief greetings. He had moved into the house approximately 3 years ago. He kept to himself. Vasquez asked if she had seen or heard anything unusual that evening. Flynn hesitated. Then she said yes. Around 11:30 p.m. she had heard shouting, a man's voice.
Angry, coming from Keller's house.
Then she heard something that sounded like breaking glass. Then a scream, not a shout. A scream, high-pitched, desperate. It lasted only a few seconds before being cut off. She had gone to her window and looked out. She saw lights on in Keller's house. She saw a figure moving past the window on the first floor. Dead lights went out. A few minutes later, she saw Keller emerge from a side door and walk to the curb. She assumed it was a domestic dispute. She had not called the police because the screaming stopped. Vasquez asked if Keller lived with anyone. Flynn said she didn't think so. She had never seen anyone else come or go from the house, but 6 or 7 months ago, she thought she had seen a young woman in the upstairs window. Just for a moment, the woman had been looking out, and she was gone. Flynn wasn't certain.
The lighting had been poor. Vasquez returned to the patrol car.
Between, he radioed for a detective and requested a search warrant application be prepared for 2847 Oakmont Drive. Detective Marcus Webb arrived at 1:22 a.m., 53 years old. 28 years with Springfield PD. He specialized in assault and domestic violence cases. He had worked hundreds of scenes where victims changed their stories or perpetrators claimed accidents. Webb interviewed Margaret Flynn himself. She repeated what she had told Vasquez. The shouting,
The scream, the glass breaking.
the figure in the window months earlier. Webb walked the perimeter of 2847 Oakmont, examined the windows. He noted that 2 ground floor windows on the rear of the house had been covered from the inside with what appeared to be blackout curtains or plywood. Unlocked, as Keller had said. He did not enter, not without a warrant, but he stood in the doorway and listened. The house was silent. At 2:40 a.m., Detective Webb received approval for an emergency search warrant based on exigent circumstances, the possibility of an injured person inside the residence. He entered 2847 Oakmont Drive with officers Vasquez and Hartman. They cleared the first floor room by room, kitchen, living room, bathroom, dining room. No one present, no signs of struggle, no broken glass. Webb noted that the living room window facing Margaret Flynn's house had intact glass and closed blinds. They climbed to the second floor. 2 bedrooms, bathroom. Both bedrooms were empty. Keller's bedroom showed signs of recent occupancy. The second bedroom was nearly empty, no furniture except a folding chair and a small bookshelf. The closet was empty. Basement. Webb examined the stairs carefully. No blood, no scuff marks, dust consistent with a fall. The floor at the base of the stairs was clean. Webb walked the basement methodically. Furnish, water heater, utility shelves, washer and dryer. Along the eastern wall near the furnace, he noticed something. The concrete floor had a seam, not a crack. A seam. The concrete on one side was slightly darker than the concrete on the other side.
The seam formed a rectangle approximately 6 feet long and 4 feet wide. Webb knelt and ran his finger along the edge.
Deliberate. Between North Caribbean.
Reset. He called Vasquez over.
They examined the seam together. Vasquez noticed a small gap at one corner, no more than a quarter inch. Webb inserted his flashlight into the gap and peered down. There was empty space below. Webb stood. He looked around the basement. Against the far wall, leaning behind the utility shelves, he found a pry bar, carried it back to the seam. He inserted the flat end into the gap and applied pressure. The concrete section lifted, not solid concrete. A panel, plywood backing with a thin layer of concrete poured over the top to match the floor, hinges on one side. The panel was heavy, approximately 80 pounds, but it pivoted up on the hinges once the edge was lifted. Beneath the panel was a rectangular opening. Wooden steps led down into darkness. Webb shone his flashlight into the opening. The beam illuminated a small room. Concrete walls, approximately 8 feet long, 6 feet wide, and 5 feet high, trapping narrativity. A twin mattress on the floor in one corner, a plastic bucket in the opposite corner, a battery-powered lantern, a tray holding an empty water bottle and the remnants of a sandwich. And huddled against the far wall, shielding her eyes from the flashlight beam, was a young woman. Detective Webb descended the steps. He identified himself as police. He asked her name. Her voice was hoarse and faint. Emily Carson. Emily Carson, 26. She had been reported missing from Bloomington, Indiana on September 23, 2017, 19 months earlier. Webb radioed for an ambulance and additional officers. He remained in the concealed room with Carson while Vasquez and Hartman secured the house. Carson was conscious and responsive but showed signs of severe malnutrition and dehydration. Her skin was pale. Her hair was matted. She wore sweatpants and a long-sleeved shirt, both visibly soiled. She weighed approximately 92 pounds. Medical personnel would later estimate she had lost between 35 and 40 pounds since her disappearance. Webb asked if she could walk. Carson said she thought so. Webb helped her to her feet. She moved slowly, steadying herself against the wall. They climbed the wooden steps together. When they reached the basement level, Carson shielded her eyes again. The shop lights were too bright. She had spent 19 months in near total darkness. Medic 7 arrived at 3:16 a.m. Paramedics placed Carson on a gurney and transported her to Memorial Medical Center. Webb accompanied her in the ambulance. During the transport, he asked minimal questions. Where was she from? Bloomington.
How long had she been in the room?
She didn't know exactly. A long time.
Did she know the man who put her there?
No. He had taken her from a parking garage. At Memorial Medical Center, Carson was admitted to the intensive care unit. Malnutrition, dehydration, vitamin D deficiency, muscle atrophy in both legs, pressure ulcers on her lower back and hips, and severe dental decay. Her core body temperature was 95.8 degrees Fahrenheit. She had not seen sunlight in 19 months. Robert Keller was in the emergency department 3 floors below, being treated for 2 fractured ribs and a broken ulna. Officers were stationed outside his room. Detective Webb returned to 2847 Oakmont Drive at 4:55 a.m. A forensic team was already processing the scene. Webb descended into the concealed room and documented its contents. The mattress bore stains consistent with long-term use. The plastic bucket contained waste. On a small wooden shelf built into the wall, investigators found a flashlight with dead batteries, 3 empty water bottles, a package of crackers, a paperback novel, and a composition notebook. Webb opened the notebook. The pages were filled with writing in pencil. Entries were dated sporadically. The first entry was dated September 24, 2017, the day of feeder Emily Carson's disappearance. I don't know where I am. I woke up here. My head hurts. There's a man. He said I'm not leaving. Subsequent entries documented days, meals delivered through the hatch, hours of darkness, sounds from above, conversations she could hear but not understand, the progression from hope to despair to a kind of numb endurance. One entry dated July 12, 2018 read, I heard him bring someone else inside, a woman's voice. She was crying, then I didn't hear her anymore. Webb closed the notebook. He climbed out of the room. He instructed the forensic team to process every inch of the house. They found additional evidence on the 2nd floor. In Keller's bedroom, inside the desk, they found a laptop. The device was password protected but was seized for forensic analysis. In the empty 2nd bedroom, they found scratches on the interior of the closet door, fingernail marks. They found a length of chain bolted to the wall inside the closet. The chain was 6 feet long with a locking cuff at the end. In the kitchen, in the cabinet beneath the sink, they found a box containing zip ties, duct tape, a utility knife, and a bottle of sedatives prescribed to Robert Keller. At 6:40 a.m., Detective Webb obtained a second search warrant, this time for the detached garage. Officers cut the padlock and raised the roll-up door. Inside the garage, they found Keller's vehicle, a 2111 Chevrolet Silverado pickup truck. They also found a workbench along the rear wall. On the workbench were woodworking tools, lengths of lumber, bags of concrete mix, and a handwritten diagram showing the dimensions of a rectangular floor panel with hinges. They also found a second laptop. Forensic analyst David Park, 39, 12 years with the Illinois State Police Crime Lab, received both laptops at 9:15 a.m. on March 15th. 2 days over, between 14. He began with the device found in Keller's bedroom. The password protection was bypassed using forensic software. By 11:30 a.m., the laptop's hard drive contained 847 image files and 34 video files. The images showed multiple women in various states of distress. Some were bound, some were unconscious, some were in the concealed room beneath 2847 Oakmont. Others were in different locations, what appeared to be a basement or garage. The video files showed similar content. Several videos depicted women being held in the concealed room. The footage was time-stamped. The earliest video was dated March 3, 2016, 3 years earlier. Park identified Emily Carson in 16 of the videos. He also identified 3 other women. Their faces were visible. Their identities were unknown. Park flagged the files and contacted Detective Webb. The case was immediately escalated. The FBI's Violent Crimes Against Children and Violent Crimes units were notified. A multi-state task force was activated to identify the other women in the images and videos. The second laptop found in the garage was analyzed the following day. It contained search histories showing queries for missing person reports, news articles about unsolved disappearances, and searches for remote properties for sale in southern Illinois and northern Missouri. On March 16th, investigators conducted a more thorough search of 2847 Oakmont Drive using ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs. The dogs alerted in 2 locations in the backyard. Excavation began at a feet or known. At a departments of 4 feet, investigators uncovered human remains, partial skeletal remains consistent with an adult female. The remains were located 18 feet from the rear fence line, beneath a patch of disturbed soil that had been covered with sod. A second set of remains was found 12 feet away at a departments of 3 feet. An accidental where forensic anthropologists estimated both individuals had been deceased for a minimum of 18 months based on decomposition and soil samples. On March 18th, the FBI released images of the 3 unidentified women found on Keller's laptop to regional law enforcement agencies. Within 48 hours, 2 of the women were identified. Jessica Arnett, 23 years old, reported missing from Champaign, Illinois on June 2, 2016. Had been seen leaving her shy feet at a restaurant near the University of Illinois campus. Her car was found abandoned 3 days later in a parking garage 40 miles south. No suspects, no leads. The case remained open. Talia Grant, 19 years old, reported missing from Peoria, Illinois on November 14, 2017. She had been a freshman at Illinois Central College. She had told her roommate she was going to meet someone she had connected with online. She never returned. Her phone was found in a trash bin behind a gas station 2 weeks later. The case remained open. Dental records and DNA were used to identify the remains found in the backyard of 2847 Oakmont Drive. One set of remains belonged to Jessica Arnett. The other belonged to Talia Grant. The third woman in the images remained unidentified. Her early 20s. She had shoulder-length brown hair. She wore a gray sweatshirt in every image. Her face showed visible fear. Investigators circulated her image nationally and internationally. No matches were found. On March 21st, Emily Carson was released from Memorial Medical Center and placed in protective care. She met with Detective Webb and FBI Special Agent Laura Kim, 42, 19 years with the Bureau, for an extended interview. Carson described being abducted from a parking garage in Bloomington, Indiana, on the evening of September 23, 2017. She had been walking to her car after finishing a shy feet at a coffee shop near Indiana University. A man approached her. He asked for directions. When she turned to point, he grabbed her from behind and pressed a cloth over her face. She lost consciousness. She woke in the concealed room. The man, she now knew was Robert Keller, told her she would not be leaving, hurt her. He told her if she screamed, he would hurt her. He told her if she tried to escape, he would kill her. For 19 months, Keller brought her food and water every 2 to 3 days. The deliveries were irregular. Sometimes he spoke to her, sometimes he didn't. He never touched her or feed her the first week. He seemed more interested in watching her, in documenting her. She heard him bring other women into the house. Process. She heard their voices. She heard them crying, heard them being moved upstairs. She never saw them. And to feed her a few days or weeks, she stopped hearing them. On the night of March 14, 2019, Carson heard Keller enter the house, furniture upstairs. Then she heard him descend to the basement. He opened the hatch. He told her he was moving her to a different location. He climbed down into the room. Carson had been holding a shard of glass from a broken water bottle.
She had been holding it for weeks.
Waiting. When Keller reached for her, she drove the glass into his shoulder and upper arm. Keller recoiled, climbed out of the room. He slammed the hatch shut. Carson heard him shouting, then silence. Minutes later, she heard the side door open and close. She waited. Hours passed, then she heard voices, footsteps. The hatch opened, flashlight beam, and Detective Webb's voice. On April 3, 2019, Robert Keller was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of kidnapping, and multiple counts of unlawful restraint and aggravated assault. He was held without bond at Sangamon County Jail. Keller declined to speak to investigators without an attorney present. His court-appointed defense attorney, Michael Torres, 47, filed a motion to suppress evidence obtained during the initial search. The motion was denied. The trial began on January 14, 2020, in Sangamon County Circuit Court. The prosecution, led by Assistant State's Attorney Rebecca Huang, 30 divers, 9, presented forensic evidence, digital evidence, and victim testimony over the course of 3 weeks. The defense argued that Keller suffered from severe mental illness and was not competent to understand the nature of his actions. A psychiatric evaluation ordered by the court found Keller competent to stand trial. On February 4, 2020, Emily Carson took the stand. She entered the courtroom accompanied by a victim advocate. She wore a blue dress, her hair had been cut short. She had gained 28 pounds since her rescue. She sat in the witness chair and looked directly at Robert Keller. The prosecutor asked her to describe her experience. Carson spoke for 40 minutes.
She described the abduction, the confinement,
the fear, the isolation, the cold, the darkness. The journal entries she wrote to stay sane, the sounds of other women above her, the silence that followed. At the end of her testimony, the prosecutor asked if she had anything she wanted to say to the defendant. Carson looked at Keller. She spoke 4 words. The courtroom was silent. Keller did not react. On February 11, 2020, after 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. Keller was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for each count of first-degree murder. The sentences were to be served consecutively. He was also sentenced to an additional 30 years for the kidnapping of Emily Carson. Keller showed no emotion when the sentence was read. He was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. Emily Carson, seated in the gallery, placed her hand over her mouth and closed her eyes. Emily Carson now lives in Portland, Oregon. She completed a degree in social work in 2022. She works with survivors of abduction and trafficking. She runs a nonprofit called Second Light, which provides financial assistance and counseling to families of long-term missing persons. Publicly about her experience twice a year. She avoids interviews but has written extensively in private journals, which she says she may publish one day. Jessica Arnett's mother, Linda Arnett, established the Jessica Arnett Memorial Scholarship at the University of Illinois. It provides financial support to students pursuing careers in criminal justice. Linda visits her daughter's grave in Champaign every Sunday. She says she will never stop asking why. Talia Grant's family moved from Peoria to Colorado in 2021. Her younger sister Maya, now 24, became an advocate for missing persons legislation. In 2023, Illinois passed the Talia Grant Act, which requires law enforcement agencies to enter missing persons reports into national databases within 24 hours of being filed, and mandates coordination between jurisdictions when cases cross state lines. The third woman, the one whose image was found on Robert Keller's laptop but whose identity was never confirmed, remains unknown. The FBI maintains an open case. Her photograph is circulated annually through national and international missing persons networks. Investigators believe she may have been taken between 2015 and 2016. They believe she did not survive. Without a name, she cannot be laid to rest. Without a name, her family does not know she is gone. Margaret Flynn, the neighbor who reported hearing the scream, still lives at 2843 Oakmont Drive. She had her locks changed. She installed motion sensor lights around her property. She checks her basement every night before bed. She says she wishes she had called the police sooner. She says she will never stop wishing that. Robert Keller is incarcerated at Pontiac Correctional Center in Pontiac, Illinois. He has never spoken publicly about the crimes. He has never expressed remorse. He receives mail from individuals fascinated by his case. He does not respond. In 2021, a production company requested permission to film a documentary about the case. Emily Carson declined. The project was canceled. The house at 2847 Oakmont Drive stood vacant for 2 years. In 2021, it was purchased by a property management company. The concealed room was filled with concrete. The basement was sealed. The house was gutted and renovated. New flooring, new paint, new fixtures. A family moved in during the summer of 22. They have 2 children. They know the history of the house. They chose it anyway because they wanted to reclaim the space. They wanted to replace the horror with something normal. The children play in the backyard where Jessica Arnett and Talia Grant were buried. A swing set now stands near the fence line. On warm evenings, neighbors hear laughter. But at night, when the street is quiet and the houses are dark, residents of Oakmont Drive still lock their doors. They still check their basements. And they still listen for sounds that don't belong.